Alliteration and anaphora. Hello, today I'll be explaining what an alliteration is. So what is an alliteration? Well, that's a good question. An alliteration is a repetition of a letter in a sentence. Simple as that. For example, a good cook could cook as many good cookies as a good cook who could cook cookies. The letter which is repeated in this example would be the letter C. And alliterations are simply words put together that create a rhythmic repetition. An alliteration does not only can be a repetition of a letter, but can also be a repetition of a vowel or repetition of an end word. For example, this alliteration uses vowels as its repeated letter. Fleet feet sweep by sleeping geese. This is an example of an alliteration that repeats the letter E. It does not necessarily have to repeat the first letter, though. We'll be talking more about that later on. But one important thing to remember is that alliterations can be used to enrich in a text, to concentrate attention on something in the text, or to show emotion in your writing. What does the word alliteration mean? So now that we have the basic knowledge of what an alliteration is, what does the word even mean? Well, I'm going to be quick and simple about it here. The word alliteration comes from the Latin word littera, which means letter of the alphabet. There's something I even learned while making this, but makes sense when I think about it. Types of alliteration. Now into the types of alliteration. There are 6 different types of alliteration. I'll be giving an example for each. Plosive alliteration, sibilance, guttural alliteration, dental alliteration, fricative alliteration, and assonance. Firstly, plosive alliteration. A plosive alliteration is a repetition of a P and B sounds. For example, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. See, we repeated the letter P in this example. It can be just one or both. It could be P or B or both. A sibilance. A sibilance is a repetition of an S sound in the letter S. For example, she sells seashells by the seashore. This one is pretty straightforward. It repeats the S sound and the letter S. Thirdly, a guttural alliteration. A guttural alliteration is a repetition of a G, R, and C sounds. For example, come and clean your chaos in your closet. Again, we repeated the C sound in this example. Fourthly, a dental alliteration is a repetition of D and T sounds. For example, he dunked the delicious donut in the dairy creamer. The D sound is repeated in the example. Almost done, 2 more to go. A fricative alliteration is a repetition of an F, PH, and V sounds. For example, our financial future fell into a freefall. The letter F is repeated in this example. Finally, an assonance is a repetition of a vowel letters. So A, E, I, O, U. I know assonances are kind of their own thing, but in alliterations, they're classified as their own category. For this, I'll use the example from earlier. Fleet feet sweep by sleeping geese. The vowels are not at the start of the words, but in the middle. This is almost always the case with assonances. The vowel E, is repeated in the words fleet, feet, sweep, sleeping, and geese. Now onto the use of alliterations. The only use for alliterations are usually poetic use. They flow very nicely and show emotion and bring attention to the poem. Therefore, the main use of alliterations is poetic use. This doesn't mean that you can't use it in another form of literature, though. Now, quick and easy tips to writing an alliteration. To begin, pick the letter you want to use to make your alliteration. You will then have to find all sorts of words starting with the letter you chose. Write adjectives, transition words, nouns, etc. Then make a sentence with all those words, or some of those words, and remember that not every word in that sentence has to start with the letter you chose, but the majority should. Now, alliteration versus anaphora. The difference between an anaphora and an alliteration is that the alliteration will repeat sounds in a sentence, but anaphoras repeat words in a sentence. This doesn't mean that in an alliteration there isn't any of the same words that are repeated though. For example, the example from earlier, a good cook could cook as many good cookies as a good cook who could cook cookies. The word cook is repeated many times, but there's also a couple more words that are repeated that start with the letter C, like cookies and could. And they're repeated at least twice. A very simple way to figure out the difference between both is simply by listening for rhythmic repetition. Alliterations contain a rhythmic repetition, but not anaphoras. Anaphoras also they repeat words, and not the start of words or middle of words. They repeat words and they're not rhythmically repeated. For example, he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person. This is an example of an anaphora. The only word repeated was the word wrong. There was no rhythmic repetition and no other words that started with the letter W, other than the word with. That doesn't really count. Well, that's all I have to say. Now I'll pass the word to my teammate.
Now for anaphora. The term anaphora comes from the Greeks for to carry up or back. They use this to structure the Bible and give it more rhythm. The dictionary definition of anaphora would be: anaphora is a rhetorical device used to emphasize a phrase while adding rhythm to a passage. This technique consists of repeating a specific word or phrase at the beginning of a line or passage. The repetition of a word can intensify the overall meaning of this piece. Now, for me, I would say the definition is when someone would repeat the same word that means the same thing, but are for different things, multiple times in a few sentences. So here's an example. We will work hard every day, every week, and every year until the job is done. So the anaphora in this sentence would be every, since it is repeated for every day, every week, every year. But it means different things because day, week, and year are all different. The second example is from Romeo and Juliet. If you would like to find it, it is in Act 2, Scene 2, line 123 and 124. It is too rash, too unadvised, too sudden to like the lightning. In this sentence, the anaphora would be too, since it is repeated for too rash, too unadvised, and too sudden. But the different words are rash, unadvised, and sudden. Different types of anaphora. There is the pronominal anaphora, which you use pronouns to represent someone. So here, John left. He said he was ill. John was replaced by he in the second part. Kind level anaphora is when something is then turned into a pronoun. John gave a presentation. Mary gave one too. Presentation is now being replaced by one. The VP anaphora is when a task a person does is replaced by a verb. John took out the trash. Mary did too. Took out the trash is now being replaced by did, which is the verb. You replace a group with an adjective. That is adjectival anaphora. A kind stranger returns my wallet. Such people are rare. Such is now replacing a kind stranger in the different half of the sentence. Why and when we use an anaphora? An anaphora is used to emphasize a sentence and gives it more emotion. It is also used to motivate and inspire the audience when speaking it. We use it at the first few words of each sentence. Thank you for watching.